You ever wonder why I love creating mythical, imagined creatures? Well, that's what we're going to explore today on today's video. So welcome back, all you creature crew. Get your creature cushion. You know what's going to go down. We're going to take a journey on the making of the epic story experience Matsu with I Paint Creatures, IPC. And if you're new here, get ready for an adventure through your imagination and open all your senses of wonder and curiosity. Because we're broadcasting from beautiful Northern California, and this is known in the epic story experience of Matsu as the Be Well Forest. And this is the place where the FunkyIPuppets finally find their place back on Earth and start to heal themselves, inspire themselves, untarnish their story stones and recalibrate their poetic compasses inside themselves. So these creatures that I create them to heal and inspire, first of all, me and be my companion in this world. They remind me who I am and where I am. They are antidotes, living symbols for desirable states of my living. And of course, I create them for others. And where that all began was at the Stanford Children's Hospital. Basically, I had started spending a lot of times in hospitals the year before when my father was ill of cancer, and he eventually passed away at 10 years old. And then the next year they found a Jupiter-sized unknown tumor right here on this bone on this left arm, and they wanted to amputate my arm, but eventually my mother convinced them to operate on it. And so that's why I have two arms. I'm still here alive, but I got to spend a lot of time in hospital rooms. And that's when I started sketching and drawing these fantastical, I first thought they were monsters. I would combine a dog's snout, with antelope ears and all kinds of maybe a unicorn, maybe cat ears, maybe different whiskers, parts from mythological dragons. And I didn't know exactly what they were. And then I had a male nurse come up to me and he said, what are you sketching or drawing there? And I really didn't know, kind of hid him from him. And then he was like, let me see him. And I showed it to him. He says, those are fantastical. Those are incredible. So he really encouraged me to do it. And a few days later, he came back when I was in the hospital waiting room again, and he gave me my first box of watercolors. And so he showed me a little bit how to use them, and I started colorizing these and making these fantastical creatures. And I first thought they were monsters, and I just kept on doing them. And eventually, I had so much time, I had them on the back of all those medical forms you got to fill out, right? And I used a ballpoint pen to draw them and the watercolor to color them. And then I started writing these little I thought they were short stories or just descriptions from my imagination of what this creature was and where it came from and what its purpose in this existence was. And eventually, I found out they were short poems, and that's the kind of the very seeds of this creature creation and I Paint Creatures and the epic story experience of Matsu. And then I think a week later or so, the same male nurse came back to me and said, you need to go create these creatures. He called them creatures, I think, back then, and for this other wing of children down this way. And back then I didn't know it was the terminal wing. It was the kids that basically had diseases and illnesses that would eventually, they would pass on. They wouldn't make it through this life. And so I would go down there and I talked to them, and I started drawing these creatures, and I found myself making them full of hope and inspiration and positive. And like if a girl loved hip hop music, I'd give the creature not only headphones, but it'd be growing out of the creature's head, right? And I would write a little poem just saying, now you can hear hip hop from miles away because you can't go to a live hip hop show, so you can hear hip hop from miles away and stuff like that. And I started asking questions like, what is their favorite thing to do in life? And the things a lot I did, those of you know me on Twitch, and when I creature stream, I make these fantastical creatures for people, and I ask them the questions of, what makes them unique. Well, this whole thing eventually I came to calling it Creaturology. And that's the living practice and creation of imaginative, fantastical creatures. And each one of these creatures, they become symbols that remind me who I am, my truth, my purpose, my goodness. And then they radiate life antidotes and wisdom for others. And they're fantastical creatures. And one of the reasons I also started really getting into this creature creation is I grew up kind of feeling out of place. I never fit in socially, or especially after being in the hospital and going through that experience very early on. I couldn't really relate to other kids. So socially, even politically, emotionally, mentally, I was like, living on Earth, but like on my own planet, And so I identified not with aliens, I identified with these fantastical imagined creatures. So these days, when I create a character or creature for the epic story experience of Matsu, I do it through the practice of Creaturology. And I'm not just drawing or imagining these creatures, I'm embodying them. I'm bringing forth an aid, a lesson, a reminder, a companion, a living symbol that comes out of the center of me, and they're part of my inner being. They're who I naturally am. And one of these examples, and I thought, if you guys like it, please leave comments about this whole video, because I would love to respond and go down pathways that you're very interested in. One thing I thought is I'd give example of what I just talked about, the whole Creaturology in the epic story experience of Matsu. And one of them, who's dear to me, right, who is Funkafied, right, is a character who's one of the lead FunkyIPuppets in the story experience of Matsu, named Rah, R-H-W. So Ramen, right, is his full name. So it's like ramen. His almost name is ramen. And he symbolized, first of all, his name, right? It is R-H-W, R-H-R-A-H, right, Rah. Right? But when phonetically you say it, and I'm into phonetics because I'm into spoken language and spoken poetry, it's also R-A-W. So he became this creature that also represents the rawness of us, the original nature of us, who we uniquely and originally are inside of ourselves, the raw parts. When you come kind of unapologetically, right? You're raw. You come forward. So that's a part of him, and he kind of became kind of a loud mouth, He speaks all loud, and one thing he symbolizes, right? And this is how I picked the color of the creature and kind of the form of the creature. Rah is blue like water in the sky, right? So his first elemental powers is he represents flow and fluidness. And, the planet and us is mostly made of water. So he is the raw elements, right? And then the sky, the endless possibilities, right? We are, the source of all the endless possibilities in this world. So he reminds us to flow. And of course, he's all fuzzy, and that, in my childhood, reminds me of feeling safe and secure and at ease with life. And then Rah, he has these certain things he says, and this is where I start to really develop the Creaturology in the creatures, right? He says, I'm Funkafied, and he always says Funkafied, and I kind of got that, of course, from my love of funk music, Parliament Funkadelic, the meters, that whole groove funk scene has always been a part of my life. And it's also, one of the base elements of hip hop, right? They sampled a lot of funk music from the 70s. And it continues on with bands like Lettuce, right? The Funksters, right? And then one of my favorites from New Orleans called Galactic. And I play those a lot on my Twitch stream. So if you're wondering some of the great tunes I played, those are some of the main ones. Of course, the new master sounds from England, I love them. So any of these so Rah says, Funkafied, be exactly who you be. And what he's basically saying, Funkafied means in the character development of Rah is be exactly who you are. Live your unique original purpose. Shine that story stone inside yourself. calibrate that poetic compass so it points to the I am, it points inward so you know exactly who you are, why you're here on the planet, and where you are on the planet inside yourself in your own identity, so you can identify yourself. And so that's what Rah really inspires. And he says, be funkified. What he means is be at joy, ease, so you can gracefully receive all the opportunities, the resources, and the relationships, and most of all, the miracles that were meant just for you here on the planet. He also always says, be funky and free. He's always telling, his counterpart, his sidekick, Glitch, little Glitch. He's always telling him, Glitch, be funky and free. And funky meaning being your unique, original, one-of-a-kind self. And being free, don't worry about what others think. Don't get stuck in the outer appearances and circumstances and situations. Listen to your story stone. Polish it. Shine it. And then you can be clear and awake and with a calibrated inward poetic compass. Your poetic truth that defines who I am, where I am, no matter the circumstances, the happenings, the people, the outward influences that come to you. So a little bit more about Rah and how he fits into the epic story experience of Matsu is after Shigin comes out of the hospital, he hears from Ryo and Taiko that all of his imagined stories and paintings and the things that really healed him from the inside out from the hospital and the experience, he starts to go on his fantastical journey, the part of the hero's journey where he really starts to get in his purpose. And his purpose, of course, first is to search out the Haku-Taku scrolls that have vanished after Atomic exploded and some of the greatest powers of creation disappeared and they seem to dissipate. He goes on a journey to find the Haku-Taku scrolls. And of course, along the way, he goes to the 96542 and he starts meeting all these creatures that have lost their will and their cause and their inspiration and how to create and how to use their imagination, how to identify themselves, how to use their poetic compass and how to reveal and make their story stone glow and untarnish it. And so Rah arrives and he's all funkified and funky free, and he drives this spaceship that's called the Funky Avenue. And it's the first way that Shigin starts getting all around all the dimensions and the realms of 96542. And he guides him. And of course, when Shigin's in the Funky Avenue and cruising around, Rah bees his natural self and he starts to remind Shigin once again that everything he went through in the hospital, the darkness, the nightmares, and even the daymares that were happening, and all the influences of the doctors and outside circumstances and situations and appearances that were telling him he was going to die. His journey was done. And Rah's right there just being all funky and fuzzy and free and reminding him. So there's a lot of scenes in Matsu where he first gets swept up after he gets out of the portal from Earth to 96542, and the Funky Avenue comes and picks him up. And together, they go on the journey to discover the Haku-Taku scrolls and start meeting the most fantastical yokai creatures that no one's ever heard of, right? And a lot of them are almost like in the story of Star Wars, where the Jedi, they kind of become rogue and they disappear because the main creative inspirational force is not there anymore. And in Matsu, it's called the Key. And so Rah, he helps awaken Shigin, which reminds Shigin that he is funkified in nature, to live fully funky and free. And this is the heart of why I love creating mythical, imagined creatures. And this is the art of Creaturology. From the base camp, I paint creatures. I'm your host, broadcasting here from the Be Well Park. Please leave some comments down below. Let me know what you think about Creaturology and the anticipation of getting to really take the experience of the epic story experience of Matsu. I'm going to be streaming on Twitch, so there's links down below. Where I revamped a lot of the Patreon, so you can start to come in and become a co-producer of this amazing epic story experience called Matsu and the FunkyIPuppets. And also down below is my Gumroad. And I built a Gumroad where I sell my handmade custom paintings of Matsu as I start to develop the story and develop the creatures and, you know, create these mythical imagined creatures. And they're for sale. I also have a lot of coaching services for voiceover acting. And, you know, I've been studying poetry my whole life, from written to spoken to short form, long form. And I love to always share and teach that to all of you. So that's down in the Patreon. And the Gumroad also has tutorials like painting on leather, painting on hats, you know, painting mythical imagined creatures and all that good stuff. And I look forward to getting to meet you, getting to know you. So first, start out by making comments down below that I can start a dialogue with you, and then answer and start taking more adventures on the making of the epic story experience of Matsu. Thank you all. This is I Paint Creatures and the epic story experience of Matsu. Thanks for coming along for the journey. Thanks for your attention. Thanks for listening. Bless you all and have a fantastic experience in every moment of your day and life.